Clutching for safety. We all do it to some degree or another. So what brought this up for me today in particular was that I was watching a video clip, and it was some drone footage of this cliff that was several hundred feet from the ocean. And it was the video footage of this drone just dropping down this cliff, this just ragged edge, and showing the terrain just dropping. And it gave me that feeling as if I were falling along with that drone all the way down to basically the ocean off of the edge of this cliff. And it was that distinct feeling, uncomfortable feeling of falling, like that. I don't know. I don't typically have a fear of heights. In other words, I'm able to go up to like the top of the Sears Tower or to lookout points and just basically go up to the edge and or if there's a rail or whatever and look over, and I have no problem looking down over an edge like that. And at some point in my life, I was doing some tower climbing. So I'd climb towers, using hardware and like a harness and all that kind of stuff, and ropes and whatnot. And I've been able to do that. But there's always been this thing, I didn't do it enough to where I got over that fear of potentially falling. And of course, you get all these training videos when you're doing safety training for climbing in order to be certified. And they show over and over again about how people have, even has video footage of people who basically have fallen to their death from towers. And some of it can just be really weird, like they don't even know why. For example, somebody could be taking a break for lunch. They're up on the top of a water tower, and then for some reason they just slide off the edge of the water tower and fall to their death. And this is while they're on a job. They're they're up there for a reason for their employment, and the only thing they can think is maybe that the person didn't tie off. They forgot to tie themselves off. They thought they were tied off or whatever. And other instances where maybe a tower collapses while the people are working on the tower and they all fall to their death and that kind of thing. And, we as humans, one of our major instincts is survival. And of course, our life is short on this earth. Even if you live to be 100 years old, 100 years in the great span of life on this planet, or in this universe really, is just such a small point in the whole ocean of life, of history. And our fight for survival is really futile if you think about it, because we know we're going to die. I mean, it's just a foregone conclusion. There's not anything that's going to keep you from death, no matter how hard you fight it. Even the richest, most successful people end up in a casket and in the ground, getting eaten up by worms and decaying and decomposing into the earth. It happens to every one of us. Yet we struggle and fight for this survival for every last minute of our lives, it seems. Until at some point, maybe if we live long enough and we're old enough and we're comfortable enough in ourselves and in what we believe is the afterlife or whatever, and we get to the point where we're on our deathbed and we just say, you know what, I'm ready to go. And we just go peacefully. We let it go. We let go of this survival instinct, the survival clutching to life. We let it go. and just relax into death, which is really where we're all going to end up. So why is this so important? Because it's that fear of death, ultimately, that is the basis for all fear. If you think about it, even if it's a fear of being humiliated, a fear, in particular, a fear of being humiliated, the feeling of unworthiness, which is also associated with that fear of being humiliated, the fear of disapproval, which is associated with that fear of being humiliated, it comes from our childhood, being even from a baby all the way on up. Anything that feels like a threat to our survival, and this isn't just humans, of course. Animals, when they're in survival mode, when they know that there's a threat of death, a larger animal is going after, chasing down a smaller animal, and they know that they're going to be the next meal for that other animal, or just be killed for whatever reason. As soon as they feel it, they're in fear mode, and they are responding accordingly. So every animal on the planet seems to have this instinctual fight for survival within them. But I think it is within our best interest as humans to overcome that fear, to actually transcend it. Overcome, I think transcend is a better word. So get to the point where we know that we know what it is to survive. We know intellectually, and we even feel, we know when there's a real threat to our lives, but oftentimes we actually feel like we're threatened with our lives when we really aren't. It's just a threat to our ego. And how is that associated with this fear of falling? Well, that fear of falling is basically associated with the fear of death, because what's at the end of that fall is actually the final hit, and then that's it, man. It's over. And I guess when I think about that fear, when I've gone into it and really, I spent several minutes just going into this fear and releasing, and it's a stubborn one. It sticks, because I can imagine myself being in a situation where I'm at the edge of a building that has no barrier. At the top, let's say I'm at the roof, on the roof of a skyscraper that has no edge, like no barrier, no wall or railing or anything at the edge of it, and just going up to the edge, and a gust of wind blows, and it puts me off balance, and then I just fall. And it's like, it's that feeling of finality, like this one decision to make this one step that much closer to the edge of this building is putting me in a situation where once that happens, there is no reversing it. It's that falling to the death and knowing that that's it. There's no do-over. There's no going back. It's done. And I guess that's what really freaks me out. And as I had gone into that feeling, I actually felt it get lighter and lighter, but it's very stubborn. And I think I'm going to have to come back to this over and over again. Because ultimately, I think this whole fear of death thing, since it's underlying everything that we feel, by going into that feeling in different aspects of how we might experience it, I believe that by releasing that fear of death over and over and over again from different scenarios, different aspects, it actually allows our true self to come out and be free, because we no longer fear that death. We no longer have this feeling of, even if it's just an ego death, Ego death and bodily death a lot of times are very connected because our body and our egos are so connected. Now, our true selves really are beyond that. The true self transcends the body and the ego, but the ego and the body are very tightly connected. And I'm wondering if that's the reason why in the Bible there's several references to the flesh. The flesh, I think, is that mind-body connection, that ego-body aspect of us that basically has all of our base emotions that creates so many problems for us. So, doing the exercise of releasing, and again, the practice is basically, can I let this go? Will I let this go? Can I do this now? And answering those questions over and over and over again for yourself, for each one of these fears, and particularly if you're feeling a fear that could end in your death. I have done this too, not just with the fear of falling, although that's a big one for me because I can easily, I was on some roller coasters just a couple of weeks ago, and roller coasters really make you feel that fear. And yet you feel the safety, but we get a thrill out of getting close to death and then narrowly escaping it. It's one of those thrills that humans like to have, because in that thrill, it takes us to the point where we get excitement from it and we're okay with it. But we're not, we pretty much believe we're not going to die, or we wouldn't get in a roller coaster and actually participate in one of those events, right? So feeling that and knowing how it feels and imagining yourself in those scenarios where it's that final moment or that last step or that little decision that puts you in the situation where, okay, this is it. It's over. It's over. And then feeling it fully in the body and localizing it, focusing on that feeling and where it is in the body and its local proximity, and then just releasing and releasing and releasing and taking the time to really go into the feeling and release it can help to eliminate more and more of the fears outside of that, because they're all tied to the fear of death. I've done this also with the fear of drowning to some extent. I even tried it with the fear of pain, certain types of pain, imagining scenarios in which there's been torture. Now, I have not personally been tortured, but reading about and hearing about different tortures that were put upon people by other people, especially during wartime scenarios, and imagining those types of tortures happening to me, and then the feeling that I get from that, the aversion to it, and then just relaxing into it. Because realize that this doesn't mean that I'm accepting the torture from a perspective morally. I'm not approving of somebody torturing me. I'm not saying that torture is okay. And I'm not being sadistic, or is it masochistic? I don't remember. But I'm not looking at it from the perspective of inviting these things to happen to me. What I'm looking at is inviting the fear to be okay. So the event itself, we need to not conflate the event and the emotion that we have as a response to the event that we imagine or that maybe we are actually in, because those are two separate things. Our fears mostly have to do with the meaning that we attach to whatever happens to us. It's not to say that somebody dying is not a sad thing for people that surround that person. But why is it sad? Why do we consider that sad? Especially when a lot of people on this planet believe that when their loved one dies, they're being ushered immediately up into heaven. So why are we sad at a funeral when a loved one dies? If we have that belief, right, that that person is actually in a better place now, what is the point of crying? It isn't because we're sad for that person. It's because of a feeling of a sense of loss. That sense of loss. And there is another feeling that's associated with death because we feel like a part of us has been pulled away from us. And that's like a part of us is dying. And by releasing the death feeling, releasing the fear of the death within us, we can actually start to feel the joy when we witness somebody who dies having lived a great life on this planet, or at least not being affected by the death in the way that we might be if we're still living in this ego state that controls us and keeps us in fear mode. So that's just my thoughts for today. Again, on this journeyless life.